The F-117A was first used in combat operations on December 21, 1989, during Operation Just Cause, the American intervention in Panama. Two Nighthawks dropped one 907-kilogram or 2,000-pound laser-guided GBU-27 bomb each on the Panamanian National Guard barracks in Rio Hato, where the country's president, Noriega, was presumed to be located. The U.S. Department of Defense press service reported that the operation was successful and that the bombs hit their pre-selected targets with surgical precision. Areas of terrain located at a distance from the barracks, guaranteed to prevent structural destruction, but close enough to cause panic among the Panamanian soldiers. Indeed, the guardsmen jumped out of the barracks in their underwear. However, as it turned out later, the actual intention had been to hit the buildings. The bombs landed with a significant deviation from their targets due to adverse weather conditions and pilot errors. Panama's air defenses, which lacked even radar, naturally posed no serious threat to American aviation. The sole reason for the F-117A's participation in this operation was the desire to test it in combat, as well as to facilitate, by generating favorable PR, the passage of funding through the U.S. Congress for another stealth aircraft program, the B-2A bomber. The first large-scale operations utilizing the F-117A unfolded during the war with Iraq in January to March 1991. However, for the stealth crews, this war began long before the first explosions in Baghdad, on August 19, 1990, when the Night Stalkers of the 415th TFS Tactical Fighter Squadron left their permanent base and headed for Saudi Arabia. 18 of the squadron's Nighthawks completed a non-stop 14.5-hour flight, receiving mid-air refueling from 9 accompanying KC-10s. Their new home for the next 6 months became the Khamis Mushait Air Base in the southwest of the country, located on a desert plateau at an altitude of over 2,000 meters. This airfield is separated from Baghdad by more than 1,750 kilometers, and it was chosen because it was out of reach of Iraqi surface-to-surface missiles. With the arrival of the secret aircraft at Khamis Mushait, unprecedented security measures were enacted, and the base regime was tightened to the absolute limit. This provided the 415th Squadron pilots with ideal conditions to prepare for war, which they diligently did for 5 months. Training flights were conducted exclusively at night, under conditions of maximum autonomy and stealth. Special attention was paid to practicing aerial refueling in complete radio silence. They flew mostly within the borders of Saudi Arabia, only occasionally approaching the Iraqi border to test the reaction of Hussein's air defenses. Not once were the stealth aircraft detected, as evidenced by the unchanged operating modes of Iraqi radars. Whenever a conventional aircraft approached the border, the air defense immediately raised its head. According to the squadron's pilots, their invisibility became a vital psychological factor, giving them added courage during night raids over enemy territory. The success of the training flights prompted the American command to increase the number of F-117As in the region. In December 1990, another 18 Nighthawks from the 416th TFS arrived at the base. Then came midnight between January 16th and January 17th, 1991, the F-117A's finest hour, when the first group of 10 Nighthawks from the 415th Squadron, each carrying 2 907-kilogram guided bombs, took off to deliver the first strikes of a new war. Neither before nor after the events of that night did the crews of the 117s achieve such significant success. A participant in that raid, Captain Donaldson, call sign Bandit 321, recalls, "We did everything in complete radio silence, navigating solely by time. Right now, we have to start the engines, now taxi out of the shelter, begin the takeoff roll, etc. At the calculated moment, we met 10 tankers that had taken off from the Saudi base in Riyadh and refueled. We flew in a common formation to the Iraqi border, then split up and everyone headed for their own target. We did everything to avoid being detected. We turned off all exterior lighting and retracted our radio antennas. We couldn't say a word to our comrades and couldn't hear if anyone wanted to send us a message. We followed the route, carefully keeping track of time. The first bombs were dropped by a pair led by Major Feast, call sign Bandit 261, on the Iraqi Interceptor and Tactical Missile Control Center southwest of Baghdad. Thanks to the precise time coordination of our actions, in the following minutes, most of the planned targets were caught by surprise and hit, including a 112-meter tower in the center of Baghdad, the key to the entire Armed Forces command system. This vital target was destroyed by Captain Kurdavid, call sign Bandit 284. As soon as the first explosions echoed across Baghdad, all ground-based air defenses, especially anti-aircraft artillery, opened chaotic fire into the night sky, trying to hit targets that were invisible to them, and which, by that time, were already heading back. Due to its undeniable cinematic quality, this moment became especially popular among artists. On most canvases depicting the F-117A, the theme is the same: a fireworks display of fiery tracer rounds in the black southern sky, the silhouettes of mosques against a backdrop of raging fires, and the shadows of mysterious, almost alien stealths dissolving into the gloom. The list of facilities damaged by the first group included 2 Air Defense Sector command posts, the Air Force headquarters in Baghdad, the Joint Command and Tracking Center in Al-Taji, and a government residence. The second wave of F-117As, 3 aircraft from the 415th and 9 from the 416th Squadron, launched follow-up strikes against the Air Force headquarters, Air Defense Command posts, as well as telephone, television, and radio stations in Baghdad, and the Satellite Communication Center. These strikes blinded the Iraqis, Bandit 321 continues, and they were unable to detect the attack of conventional aircraft approaching right behind us in time. The air defense was completely disorganized. We could see on the indicators in our cockpits how Iraqi MiG-29s were flying all around us. But they were blind, they couldn't detect us and get a lock on. During the first 24 hours, similar 5.5-hour raids were carried out by all 36 Nighthawks, 24 of which were in the air exclusively during hours of darkness, while 12 flew partially in daylight, taking off after 1700 local time. The majority of the strikes were carried out by single aircraft, and only 3 ground targets were attacked by pairs. In these cases, the wingman, using an infrared system, could assess the results of the flight leader's bombing and adjust his own attack. As a rule, the F-117As operated autonomously, without the involvement of electronic warfare (EW) aircraft, as jamming could attract the enemy's attention. Generally, throughout the war, in order to maximize stealth operations were planned so that the nearest Allied aircraft was at least 160 kilometers away from them. Only in a few instances did the 117s coordinate with EF-111s and F-4Gs. F-117A crews flew missions against planned targets every night. 2 weeks into the war, it became clear that the combat effectiveness of the Nighthawks was quite high. They were sent on missions more and more frequently. The workload on the crews was growing. To assist the exhausted pilots who were flying combat sorties every night, on January 26th, another 6 stealths, along with pilots and some equipment from the 417th TFTS, Tactical Fighter Training Squadron, were relocated to Khamis Mushait. Thus, the total number of F-117As participating in the conflict reached 42. The arrival of reinforcements helped to somewhat alleviate the strain on the crews and hardware. Now, the pilots took to the air once every day and a half to 2 days, and yet each of them eventually logged between 100 and 150 combat flight hours. The assertion regarding the high effectiveness of the F-117A in that war is considered undisputed. This is evidenced, in particular, by the successful use of stealth aircraft to strike strategic bridges in Iraq, whereas previously over 100 unsuccessful sorties had been flown by F-15, F-16, and F/A-18 aircraft. Another example, 4 days before the start of the Allied ground offensive, 17 F-117As struck oil pipelines within a 27-minute window, which the Iraqis had intended to fill defensive trenches in Kuwait with oil. Out of 34 targets, 32 were hit. An equally important result of the Nighthawk's combat operations was the destruction of surface-to-air missile sites in central Iraq, which allowed B-52 crews to carry out carpet bombing unimpeded. The stealths are also credited with the destruction of several Iraqi T-16s, which were allegedly preparing to launch a chemical weapons strike. Overall, during the war, F-117As flew 1,271 sorties, lasting over 7,000 hours, and dropped 2,087 GBU-10 and GBU-27 laser-guided bombs with a total weight of about 2 tons. Their success rate, the relative number of combat sorties resulting in the destruction of assigned targets, was, according to official estimates, 80 to 95%. Specifically, it is claimed that stealth pilots achieved 1,699 direct hits, committing only 418 misses. Note that during the Vietnam War, the success rate averaged 33%, and by the early 1990s, the norm for conventional aircraft was 50%. But the most impressive claim, perhaps, is that while constituting a mere 2.5% of the total number of aircraft deployed in the Persian Gulf zone, the F-117A struck roughly 40% of all strategic targets attacked by the Allies. Speaking later at a U.S. congressional hearing, Lieutenant General Chuck Horner, the commander of the multinational air forces in the Persian Gulf, stated, based on this data, that low observable aircraft, such as the F-117A and B-2, would be indispensable in future localized conflicts similar to the Gulf War. The focal point of Horner's testimony was a comparison of 2 raids against heavily defended Iraqi nuclear facilities in Al-Tuwaitha, south of Baghdad. The first raid was carried out during the day on January 18th, involving 32 F-16C aircraft armed with conventional unguided bombs, escorted by 16 F-15C fighters, 4 EF-111 jammers, 8 F-4G anti-radiation aircraft, and 15 KC-135 aerial tankers. This massive aviation group failed to accomplish its mission. The second raid was conducted at night by only 8 F-117As, each armed with 2 GBU-27 bombs, accompanied by 2 aerial tankers. This time, the Americans destroyed 3 out of the 4 Iraqi nuclear reactors. According to Horner, the same damage could have been inflicted in a single sortie by 2 B-2 bombers without the need for aerial tankers. However, we will refrain from continuing to quote the enthusiastic responses to the Nighthawk's successes from American generals, senators, and other officials responsible for shaping public opinion. This is partly because there is also other information regarding the effectiveness of the F-117A's actions in Iraq. For example, some sources claim that out of several guided bombs, only 1 hit its target, and the actual success rate of the stealth aircraft did not exceed 30%. With the cost of a single GBU-27 bomb at $175,000, this made the use of precision-guided weapons financially burdensome. According to official statistics, in the Persian Gulf, smart munitions accounted for less than 8% of all aviation ordnance used by the Allies, yet their cost amounted to 85% of the value of all missiles and bombs dropped on the enemy. Furthermore, on the combat record of the F-117A and simultaneously on the conscience of its crews are several tragic incidents. For instance, the destruction of a bomb shelter in Baghdad on February 13th, which was mistakenly identified as a command post. This attack resulted in the deaths of over 100 civilians, sparking massive global outcry.
Another interesting point: all information sources controlled by the U.S. Air Force unanimously assert that throughout the entire war, not a single stealth was shot down or even damaged by enemy fire. At the same time, there are reports that one F-117A was shot down on January 20, 1991, by an Iraqi Igla manpads. The aircraft allegedly crashed in the desert within Saudi Arabian territory, and Hussein's subordinates simply had no opportunity to present its wreckage as proof of their victory. With the conclusion of Operation Desert Storm, the successes of the F-117A also began to wane, although stealths periodically fought in this region throughout the following decade. Thus, during a punitive operation against air defense targets in southern Iraq, command posts, SAM sites, and radars, on January 13, 1993, the F-117As proved to be highly ineffective. 6 of these machines managed to hit only 2 out of 6 assigned targets. In 2 cases, laser guidance of the bombs was lost as they passed through clouds. In a third, the pilot failed to spot the target, and in the fourth, the pilot incorrectly identified a navigational waypoint and bombed a decoy target. This highlights the F-117A's capability to conduct operations only in favorable weather conditions. And the described raid, which incidentally involved 38 aircraft of various types, took place at night in poor visibility. It was the weather, according to Pentagon representatives, that caused the low effectiveness of the strike. Out of 32 planned targets, only 16 were hit. In December 1998, F-117As operating from bases in Kuwait participated in Operation Desert Fox, the bombing of Iraqi factories producing weapons of mass destruction. Over 4 days, American Aviation flew 650 sorties against 100 targets, and the Navy launched 100 Tomahawks. However, almost nothing was reported about the results of the operation, which can be interpreted as evidence of their absence. The sluggish, low-intensity war involving stealths in the so-called no-fly zone in southern Iraq continues to this day. For instance, between December 1998 and May 2000, the Iraqis created a threat to U.S. and U.K. aircraft 320 times, to which they responded with constant strikes against air defense facilities. During 1999, they dropped 1,500 bombs there, and no fewer than 500 more in 2000. In February 2001, 24 Allied aircraft launched a new strike against traditional F-117A targets, radar sites, and air defense command posts in the Baghdad area.